like we have discussed, like industrial sector was limited in our country, and it was limited because of the Britishers don't want it. Because if we produce our goods or our finished goods of our own, then their industrial sector will just start deteriorating because of it, and that's why they didn't let it be. And that was because of limited operation of public sector. Like what the government of that time did, they just confined to what railways, they just only focused on railways or power generation, like today we have NTPC or Indian Railways and all. And another is communication, like that, at that time there was no telephones or mobile phones, but there was a postal service or telegraph services. And another is the ports. Matlab means one deal is that, like, the government completely focus on what, they just completely have the focus on all these things, all these particular departments, and that's why they are not focusing on that particular industrial sectors or whatever, because this is a two-way strategy. They're just flourishing themselves, and they are just deteriorating our country, so that we could not just grow our economy. And now we come to the foreign trade. How good the foreign trade uh, in the past in India? Like India was great in trade, export was in surplus, and which brings a lot of gold and silver in our country. But it was a matter of around 1600, 1700, or before that. That's why we were just known as the golden bird. But what the Britishers had did, they had just start putting restrictive policies on our production. Whatever we produce, they just take away, and literally what they just start managing our farmers. Like they just give them, like, you have to grow this and this. Like they have just told our farmers, like, you have to grow indigo or something. uh, when the Britishers came to India, we became an exporter of primary products like raw silk and cotton, wool, sugar, indigo. Whatever these things are the completely raw material for their industry, so that they could just produce the things and just bring back to our country and just start sell it. That's why the Britain maintain a monopoly on India's export and import, because they rule us. They just maintain a monopoly, and half of the trade was restricted to Britain. Only means the half of the trade was just done with the Britain, and rest of other was just allowed for some of the countries like China. It is just a, where the China actually, and the Sri Lanka down the stairs, like it is just in the south. Persia in the west, like it was the older name of Iran. And around the same time, like it is around the 1869 exactly, the Suez Canal was just made, and it is just I think after making shoes, after being after the built of after the Suez Canal has been built in 1869, the trade has just increased. And why it is just increased or being easy? Because of Suez Canal has just shortened around 10,000 kilometers of distance. Because whenever we have to make the trade from Europe, we have to just come across Africa down the Cape of Good Hope, and we just came to the Gujarat or somewhere in the eastern or western part of the country. In the same way, we have to come from the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. You could just search over Google and you could just find the map of easily. India's wanted. But still, like I have just told you, like we were just a very good exporter before the Britishers. We are still very good exporter. But what is happening, the export was just half of, like we had just discussed, I have just told you, like half of the trade was done with the Britain. So still we are just a good exporter, like we are exporting our raw material to the Britain and or many of the other countries as well. But what is just coming in the place of that, in the exchange of that, the gold or the silver or whatever it is, all the things are just gone to the Britain, or being spent on the expenses of war. The war they have just fought with whatever, with the France, or with in the First World War, Second World War. All the things came from where? From the our country state. Whatever we are just selling to the other people, and they are just taking the profit. This way, like we are just not reaping all the profit out of that, and we are just, because we are the slaves. And now we just came to the demographic condition of our country at that time. Like the demographic condition of our country was that, like population details was firstly collected in 1881, and in again in 1921 we had just again collected the details, and we find out that like the rate of growth and the population, neither was just too high. Why? Because there was just two things. But first of all, we just go line by line. The literacy rate of the were 16%. Literacy rate was just too low because there was a orthodoxy like Hinduism and Muslims and was there, and there was no Western education. We just believe in superstition mainly. We didn't believe in the facts and the figures. We just believe in all completely superstition and all the gods and whatever. That's why we have just a very low literacy rate. Lesser of the peoples know read and write or whatever. Another thing is that public health facilities were unavailable to the large chunk of population. Like there was no public health facilities, and that's why a lot of disease like air and waterborne disease were just start spreading. Like it was just an epidemic to the whole country, and that's why the mortality rate was just 218 per thousand of the child. Mortality rate is what? Like it is the death rate of the infants actually. Infant mortality, I should write it infant mortality rate actually. So what it is, like the infant of less than 1 year died, uh, if they died in the age of less than 1 year, in that case it is called infant mortality rate, like the death of that particular infant. So it was just like not too good. It was just like 1,000 children uh, take birth, and 218 dies. But now it's improved drastically. It was just improved like three times. If you just divide it by three, it's like came there 63. Today it is 63 per thousand, and the life expectancy at that time was just 32 years, and nowadays it is 63 years. If we talk about poverty, the no reliable data was extensive, means available, but it was extensively prevailed because the Britishers never take care about Indians, and Indians didn't have even, you know, that like there was just a lot of unemployment, and a lot of times they came the famines and many natural calamities like floods and all. That's why there was just a lot of poverty was there. Now we came to the occupational structure. The occupational structure of a country at the Britishers' time was the agriculture. People was the 75 to 70% was the 10% were in manufacturing, and the other 15 to 20% were in service sector. But the regional variation was there. Like in Bombay and Bengal, most of the people were just very maybe dependent on service and the manufacturing in the Bombay and Bengal, because it was just being taken by the Britishers. Mainly the Britishers were there in the Bengal and especially in the Bombay. The manufacturing and service sector was there. But if we take the Odisha, Rajasthan, Punjab, the people were more dependent on what? On the agriculture only. Now we came to the infrastructure. Like infrastructure at the time of the Britishers, the railways, the ports, the water transport, post, telegraph developed. Yeah, these things just came to our country. Like railways, Britishers take the railways to country. Like it was not for the India's development, but for the colonial interest. Completely, it was just for the colonial interest. Like why the railways was just developed, because they just want what? They just want like easily the raw material that is coming from our country, they could be just be taken from one place to another place, so that they could be taken the material that is in the central India or the center in the country or Delhi or somewhere, they could just take it to the Bengal or somewhere, Kolkata or somewhere, so that they just load all the material to their ships and can just send it to their country, or to export it or import it easily. This way railway helps them. And another thing, the roads previously, what the roads is just during the 16 or 1700, it was not just fit for the modern transport. Like modern transport, you could just say like the wheel actually that happens to for like today, the, we could not just move on with that particular wheel on that time of road. Like those roads were just fit for the mobilizing army at that time. Like Aurangzeb or Akbar has just a great army. That army could just mobilize easily on that road, but not for the other thing as well. Now what the Britishers do, they just make a good road. They just make a road so that the raw material could be taken from the to the nearest railway station or the port. But still the rural areas road were nil, because the colony never want, like they didn't want to lose the money. They don't want to actually waste the money over the roads in the rural areas. They just want what? Their profit. That's why they just never care about it. And especially when there comes the rainy season, the peoples living there suffered from the natural calamities and famines because they just have a cut. Like there was a they have the cut from the mainland, and there was no food. And actually, if they have the food, that just flow out in the flood or something. And after this, British has just introduced railway in India in 1850s, and it is just exactly 1853 when the first rail in India started from Thane to Mumbai. First railway affected the Indian economy. And how it affected, like it enabled the people to undertake long distance travel, hence breaking geographical barrier. Like the peoples came from like living, if someone living in Bengal, they could just easily move to the Bombay or somewhere, or south to north, they just connected completely, or from west to east, anyone just go or come from one place to another place very easily because of that particular railway. And it encouraged the commercialization of agriculture, which affected the self-sufficiency of the village. How it affected, like if you are producing one item here, and you could just take it to another place, like you could just maintain easily a commercial relationship between one place to another. And this way the thing is just traveling faster. India's export increases but profit goes to Britain. Like I have just told you, India's profit how increases. Like you could just take away the raw material from Delhi or Rajasthan or Maharashtra to the nearest port, and this way the export increases. Like if the things are just traveling from one place to another, and you have just accessibility to those, then you could just easily make the take away the things, and this way you export the things. As a social benefit by the Indians outweighed by the economic loss to the country. And this way the benefit that had been just given by the Indian railway was outweighed by the economic loss to the country. Britishers even try the inland waterways, like it is just in their country as well. Like you have just seen some Hollywood movies or something, and you definitely have seen like their inland waterways there, and people start rowing there, or some other motorboats have their they have their motorboats. They had just made the coastal canal on Odisha, but it failed to compete with Indian Railway because Indian Railway is just too fast or something. Maybe another reason maybe there. The expansive system of the electric telegraph in India served the purpose of the law and order. Yeah, the Britishers uh, came with electric telegraph in India. There is the Indian Postal Service is always also being taken by the Britishers in India, but it remained all through inadequate. I don't know the exact reason. Maybe in the coming chapters they just tell us the reason. And this way we just come to the conclusions. Britishers ruled our country for 200 years. And this way the agriculture sector, what they did, they just agriculture sector was just completely settled, means that it was just completely destroyed. Because why? Because the peoples are just coming more and more, because the handicraft is just the handicraft sector is just completely destroyed because of the Britishers. That's why the peoples from the handicraft section came to the agriculture, and there was a surplus labor. The peoples has got increased, the labor got increased because of people are getting unemployed, and productivity was extremely low. We have discussed. And the industrial sector needs modernization, needs public investment, and there was no public investment. Foreign trade was to feed industrial revolution in Britain. The foreign trade was just like the gold was just going to Britain only. And the same way with the infrastructure like railways need upgradation, expansion, and public orientation. And what the road needed to be constructed, especially in the rural areas. And there was just too much poverty and unemployment requires public economic policies, like the government have to take the action for the economic development of the country. And same with the social and the economic challenges before the country was enormous.